Okay, so today's daf is daf Ayin Gimel 73 in Masechet Zevachim. We actually got, because short daf yesterday, we got pretty far down and it was difficult to find a good place to stop. So Dove got down to the fourth line from the bottom of Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. But let me share my screen and then we'll get started. We'll provide some background on where we are so that you, even if you haven't been around for the last few days, you'll know exactly what we're doing today. So the opening Mishnah of the eighth chapter of Zevachim, which is referred to, the Perek is referred to as Perek Tarovet. Even though it doesn't begin that way, right? It begins Kol Zevachim, but that was the way the first Perek began, and so as a result, to avoid confusion, we focus on the third word, which is referring to Shanis Arvu, which got mixed up. And so as a result, it's referred to as the Perek Ta'arobit. And it deals with lots of mixtures as we are currently going through. And that Mishnah taught that if certain animals got mixed in with live animals, so for example, you know, if there's a chatas that it needs to die because, for example, it was lost and a replacement was put in and then it was found again. And so now this animal is for a chatas that's already been offered, so it's not a necessary sacrifice, and you can't just offer a sin offering voluntarily, and you can't offer it for something new because once it's there's a machlokas whether once something is puzzle, if it's live, it's going to be puzzle for forever. We're going to deal with that concept of dichoy over the course of today. But the bottom line is that if it got mixed in with other live animals now that are set aside to be sacrificed, they're all going to be left to die. And yesterday we asked the question, why don't we say, hey, let's follow the rove? That's the concept that we have throughout much of Talmud. Much of the Gemara, it says, what we follow the rove, holchen achar rove. So why don't we say that here? And so we explained yesterday the answer that we don't say that because the Mishnah is following the view that even items that are sometimes counted cannot be nullified. That we went through, because we ended up coming up with three different viewpoints. There was the view that if it's something that's always counted, then it's going to be something that's not nullified. There's a view that if it's generally counted, it's not going to be nullified. And then three is if it's even sometimes counted. And animals apparently are only sometimes counted. They're not even generally counted, or at least according to one opinion. So the bottom line is that we initially said that that's the reason that in our Mishnah we don't say that we follow the rove, because there are some things that are so important that we say that we're not going to follow the rove. And so now we're going to give a second, much briefer answer to this question of why don't we follow the rove, and that's the answer that's offered by Rav Ashi. And so we pick up with the fourth to last word on the fourth to last line on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. And so Rav Ashi says, Afilu Tema Rabbanan. You know what? You can even say it's the rabbis. Now, this is most likely, it doesn't have to be, but most likely this is a reference to the rabbis in the Mishnah in Orla. We saw a Mishnah yesterday, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Vav and Zayin, which noted the fact that when you have a certain if you have some kind of klayim and it got mixed up with other things, all of it is going to need to be burned because you can't benefit from klaya kerem. And so as a result, you're going to have to burn it all. And why is it that we say that even in that context, you're not going to follow the rove? And the answer is because, first it was about fenugreek, one particular kind of very important produce. And then it noted that that is true. The rabbis say that Rabbi Meir said that anything that's normally counted is going to be something that is not batal. And then the Chachamim say no, only 6 different items are going to be not batal, and then Rabbi Akiva adds a 7th item. And so the bottom line is that according to the rabbis, the list of things that grow from the ground that we don't that we consider something that is not capable of being batal is a very small list. But Afilu Teim Rabban, we can say that it's even the rabbis who say that only thing when it comes to the things that grow from the ground, it's only that small list of 6 items. But when it comes to things that are alive, that's going to be the exception, the low batley. And so as a result, it is not going to be nullified. And that's exactly how we effectively conclude. And so that's why live animals can't be nullified. Okay, so now that we've sort of dealt with the concept of why, as a group, we cannot say that all of them should be nullified, we're now going to touch on what happens if we take one out of the group. Meaning that if, for example, we've seen this concept in Sanhedrin, and we will see it again in Chulin, the idea of what happens if you have 9 kosher stores in a city, 9 meat kosher stores in a city, and 1 non-kosher meat store in a city. And you go into one of them, you don't remember which one you went into, and now you have a piece of meat that is problematic. Well, the answer is that because the 10 different stores have their own fixed location, and you are taking out the piece of meat from one of those fixed locations, and we don't know which one. When you take something from something that's fixed, we say that anything that you take from a fixed location, it's as if it's a 50-50 chance that you took it from the one that's problematic. And therefore, we don't have the concept of batal, of nullification. On the other hand, if instead of having gone into one of these stores and gotten the piece of meat, you literally found a piece of meat on the street, and obviously it's wrapped so that, but the wrapping doesn't have the name of the store on it, and so now you say, well, where did this come from? Well, then you look at where the majority of all meat comes from. And if the majority of the meat is coming from kosher stores, so then, the majority of the meat in the town is kosher. Well, now this particular meat we can assume is kosher. So those are the two concepts. And it all depends on whether the thing that the aspect of taking out involves pulling it out from a thing's sort of original and fixed location. But if in fact you're pulling it out from a random location, well, then all of a sudden now we can follow the road. So we're going to ask the question, why don't we use this concept to help us in this case of all of these mixed together sacrifices? Let's pull one of them out. We look at, where is this likely from? We say it's likely from the animals that are kosher for sacrifices. And so as a result, maybe we should be able to offer this as a sacrifice. So that's the Gemara's question as we pick up with the beginning of the second to last line on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. So v'nimshach v'nikarev chad minayu. Let's pull out one, and then we can bring that one. V'nema called to parish meruba parish, and anything that gets separated is separated from the majority. And so we'll say that this is from the majority. The majority are valid sacrifices, so we should be able to offer this as a sacrifice. So nimshok, you're telling us to pull out havala kavua. Every animal that is in its place is considered in a fixed place, and so each animal has its rule that's associated with it, and it's either a kosher animal or a not kosher animal. It's just like the 10 stores that we gave in the example to begin with. And as we turn to Ayin Gimel and Bet, it says, "B'chol kavua k'mechza al mechza dami." And so everything that you take out of its assigned location, it's as if it's a 50-50 chance that we treat it as a 50-50 chance. Obviously, from a statistical perspective, and Charlie, as our local statistician, can confirm this, from a statistical perspective, neither of these make a difference. But on some level, and there are a number of different explanations, the one that I particularly appreciate is the fact that on some level, there's a responsibility that we have to understand what we're doing, to focus on what we're doing. And so as a result, to not, when everything has its specific location, there's sort of like an extra responsibility to understand what its origins are. And so as a result, therefore, we're going to treat it as if it's 50-50. And so as a result, if that's the case, so we can't just pull one out and say, let's follow the majority, because we're going to treat it as if it's 50-50. So
Are we saying he doesn't remember from which store he took it? And for
correct.
example,
That's in the example
example of the
of
stores.
the stores. But in our case, it got mixed in, but we knew at the original what it was. And because we knew originally what it was, it's considered as if it has a fixed location within the group. And so as a result, it's as if we're pulling it out from one of the stores. That's exactly right. So so let's as Rashi says it, Yakuvotam, force them shenidui, so that they'll move, shianudu, that they'll move. Delola habi kavua, get them moving, move them around. And so as a result, it won't be from the fixed location. Now, Rashi's interpretation suggests that we could even watch it and cause the moving. Other commentaries suggest that maybe that wouldn't work. But in any event, the bottom line is we'll follow Rashi here and just say, so get it moving. And now they're not in their location. And V'nema called the parish Meruba parish. And we'll say that whatever gets separated is going to be separated. So why doesn't that work? So Amarava, Gzeir Shema Yavo, Yud Kohanim B'vas Achas V'yikrevu. Maybe 10 Kohanim will come all at the same time and they'll take animals. Now, it's not we're not going to suggest at the moment that they're going to all take the animals at the same time, but you'll see that the animals will be all offered at the same time. Let's take a look at the next Rashi. Amar Rava, second line on Ayin Gimel and Bet. We're thinking at this moment, hashta, at this moment, that we got to be worried that maybe after all 10 are taken, echad, each one individually, ad shechshachtu yud, until 10 of them are slaughtered, Vehem Rov, and let's say that this 10, in our example, are the majority. So you end up with 15 animals, one of them is problematic, and now 10 of them have been taken out of the Rov. Yavo Yud Kohanim, and now 10 different Kohanim come, Vizriku Mehen V'yaktiru Imurehen Ke'echad, and they all sprinkle the blood and throw the blood and put the burned parts of the carbonate on the altar all at once. The Efshar L'tzamtzem. And maybe you could say that they could do it all at once, because after all, you don't have to, unlike sort of wiping with the finger on the edge where there's one location and you can't do multiple kohanim, here everybody's just throwing. So everybody can just throw the blood at the same moment, and everybody's throwing the animals. Everybody could throw those animals at the same moment. And now what'll happen? We'll find out that we're bringing at the same time Ruba Babas Akas. We're bringing a majority of the 15 animals at the one time. And now Beruba. Well, we have to assume, if we're going to ask where is the usher animal, it's most likely going to be among the rove. And now that you're bringing and throwing the rove all onto the altar at the same time, Beruva Isay, it's going to be in the rove. And so as a result, we need to be worried about it. To Bishlama, now everything works. When we take everything individually, so then when you went to Umakari Kama, and each one gets brought individually, first one first, and so on. Because Ikalamemer to Kolchad to Karid, because then you could say with each one individually that's brought, beheter, that it's brought in with permission. Meruba parish, because it's separated from the rove. Because even if you separate 10 out of 15, even the last of the 10, when you separate that last one, it's one, and there are five remaining. So if you have to ask, is it in this one or in the five remaining? It's likely to be in the five remaining. That's more likely. And so as a result, each one can be brought because it's brought separated from the majority. V'isura hana bahani depaishi. And the who and comes to which one is the one that we're not allowed to benefit from. It's from the ones that are left over. Dahavu ruba ligabe, because relative to the one that we just took, that's the majority. Abal hashta. But now in this case where we offer the 10 sacrifices all at once, to karbi ki adadi, that when we bring them all together, lo havuhani de paishi ruba dilgabayu. We can't say that the leftovers are a majority relative to it, because 10 is more than 5. So as a result, that's why maybe we should say that that is going to be a problem. And so as a result, yes, technically you can get the animals moving and then remove one and you'd be able to offer it as a sacrifice. But we're going to say that the rabbi said, don't do that, because maybe you'd have 10 Kohanim coming all at once and separating and throwing the blood all at once. And then all of a sudden, now you have a majority of the blood being thrown all together. And now all that blood is the more likely to be holding and containing the blood of the animal that is the one that you're not allowed to benefit from. And so as a result, you shouldn't be able to do that. It should be usher. And so because of that concern, that's why Rava says that you can't even just move the animals and take one out individually. So
So how did you come up with the number 15? Was that just random, or suppose there were 100? Suppose there were
No.
50.
It was based on the fact that Rashi tells us that 10 is a majority. That's how I came up with the number 15. So it could have been 19, but the bottom line is that it says in the last of the wide lines of Rashi, it says Vehaim Rove. It says that the 10 constitutes rove. Rashi is explaining what the Gemara must mean when it says that 10 Kohanim are coming at once. It means that 10 was the majority of the mixture. But whatever it is, the bottom line is you tell me how many are in the mixture, and we could come up with the number that would be a majority of it. That's a basic principle within number theory. So you would be able to come up with the right number to use. But the point is that Gemara chooses, I don't know, don't want to quite say randomly, but it chooses a specific number to indicate that this is going to be a majority. And so as a result, that's the concept that Rashi is highlighting. And so that's how
if there had been 100.
So if there had been 100, so he would have said that there would be 60 Kohanim that came all at once.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so Amar Le Ahumir Rabbanan LeRava. So now one of the rabbis says to Rava and asks the question, Mayata Megisa Asira, 1 second. You're going to tell me that everything was okay until the blood is in the bowl. And now suddenly this blood that's in the bowl, which we've understood to be kosher blood that we can throw on the Mizbeach, all of a sudden now you have 10 bowls and now it's not kosher? That doesn't make any sense. So as a result, as Rashi says, El miyata megisa asira kolomar v'chima achar shemashchu v'laku echad. Once you've already removed one by one, levado, and taken it on its own, ubinidnud, and you've done so by moving the animals. Decholchad, you're moving all of the animals. Da'amar demeruba parish, and now we say that we are saying that you're taking it from the majority. V'shachtan, and you shachted it. V'kabel daman, and you accepted its blood. B'magis, in the bowl. B'chazaka shehu kasher, it's got a chazaka that it's kosher. So now somehow this blood that's in this bowl, chosrin and mitzdarfin hashochtin le'ayot rov lehiaser, you're suddenly going to say that it now groups together with the other blood and now all of a sudden becomes usser? How does that work? We don't have that principle. We don't have, in general, a principle that once something is kosher, it could somehow become puzzle by combining it with other, even though it's separate and even though we can identify it, now somehow there's more of the bowls, and now we're going to say that it's usser. That's just not something that's done in the halachic system. So as a result, we're going to clarify and offer a second interpretation.
Why
So
not say
no,
that something? Don't we can if you have a kosher pot of stew and someone pours a gallon of milk in there, doesn't it become usher?
of course, but we're not dealing with a situation where anybody is changing the nature of the blood in bowl number one. They're just putting next to bowl number one, bowl number two, and bowl number three, and bowl number four, and bowl number five, and bowl number six, and bowl number seven, and bowl number eight, and bowl number nine, and bowl number 10. And now all of a sudden you've got 10 bowls up that are lined up, each that had blood that is considered with a chazaka of kosher, and now all of a sudden the 10 lined up bowls are no longer kosher. That's the issue. There is no combination of something that's not kosher with something that's kosher. You're combining two things that are kosher, and that's the problem that the rabbi is asking to Rava. And so as a result, Rava realizes that he's right and therefore offers an alternative explanation. The Gezerah is not because the 10 Kohanim are going to throw the blood at the same time, but rather Mishum Shema Yavo Yud Kohanim Bevas Achas B'Yikhu. No, maybe the 10 Kohanim are going to take the animal at the same time. And now if you have 10 people taking the animal at the same time, so now those all group together and you say, which one is more likely to have the non-kosher? The 10 is more likely than the 5. And so as a result, so the 10 is more likely than the 5. So all 10 of them are going to be not kosher. And it won't be that there was ever a chazaka. That's what he's going to be undermining. But the Gemara then says even that doesn't work because ba'asara kohanim b'bas achas mi'efshar, is it possible for 10 kohanim to take wild animals or, even domesticated animals at the exact same time? That's not going to be possible. So Ella Amar Rava, so as a result, Rava offers a third possible explanation, Mishum Kavua. Nah, the concern is that maybe you'll never get the animals moving in the first place. And so as a result, because you'll never get the animals moving in the first place, it's always going to be the concept of chol kavua kemechza amechza dami. So you'll never have the chazaka in the first place. And so as a result, it would be usher. And so that's why we're going to say that the rabbis say that you can't just take one of the animals out and now say, oh, it's meruba parush, and therefore you're able to offer it as a sacrifice.
Why couldn't we say that? Because the animals are in a deer, right? They're in an enclosure, and 10 Kohanim walk in, each one takes an animal at the same time. Why is that not possible? The animals aren't running away. They're not going anywhere.
So I think it's that a major time-consuming effort of grabbing an animal and picking it up is not something that it's easy to coordinate that many people. But the bottom line is that you don't necessarily, what we're really trying to do here in the Gemara is to try and identify a more likely reason for the rabbis to say that we're still going to prohibit this, even though we have this concept of kol de parish, meruba parish. That even though we have that concept, we're going to say that we're concerned. And so, yes, maybe you're right that we could coordinate it all together, but that is a very unlikely thing. And so as a result, let's take a look and see if we can find something more likely. And the more likely thing is that we'll forget that we need to move the animals as either a group or as an individual in order for us to say that when we take out one of them, that we're taking it out not from a kavua location, but from a random location, and therefore we're going to say that we can follow meruba parush. And so that's the idea. So again, it's not. I don't want to emphasize the fact that it's not possible, but that's again the question is that going to be the thing that's going to cause the rabbis to make a gzera? So, having identified now the rabbinic zera that we're going to say that the we don't want any of the animals to be brought because we're worried that you won't get them moving, and therefore it'll be kavua, and therefore it'll be as if you take it's a 50-50 and not kamatza al matzah and not a majority, and therefore it wouldn't be kosher for you to bring the sacrifice. So once we say that, Amar Rava goes so far as to say, Hashda de Amri Rabbanan lo nakriv. Now that the rabbis say, don't bring any of the animals, inakriv lo maratze. Even if they are brought, you know what? It does not work. It's not accepted. It does not create a sense of acceptability. It's not going to fulfill the bringer's obligation or provide atonement. And that's a remarkable statement that the rabbis are doing. So let's say, so in second, Rav Huna bar Yehuda challenges that. Ase Rav Huna bar Yehuda l'Rava. So he challenges Rava and cites the following Mishnah. This is a Mishnah, second Mishnah in Kinim, back into our old friend Kinim, which is we're gonna, we see regularly in these prakim because we're dealing with bird sacrifices, or we've been dealing with bird sacrifices. You have a bird, and again, it's Meseches Kinim, so we're dealing with birds here. A bird sin offering, shenis arvu ba'ola, that gets mixed up with a fully burnt offering. Va'ola shenis arba b'chatas, or vice versa, and ola becomes mixed with chatas. Afilu achas beripo. Even if you've got one with 10,000. So in either direction, because we no longer have the ability to offer any of these birds in the form that it was certainly intended, yamusu kulan, they all need to be left to die. Bamed dvarim amurim, where is that talking about? B'kohen nimlach. That's dealing with a situation where a Kohen asks for advice and asks, what do I do about this situation? Well, then that's going to be the case. Aval b'Kohen she'ein nimlach. But if the Kohen didn't ask for advice and wasn't told to let all the birds die, and actually brought the birds, asan lamala, if he brought the birds above, meaning like an ola, mechza kasher umechza pasul. So then half of them, any of the, here it doesn't mean literally half, but it means the portion of them that are olot would be kosher because they were brought properly. Umekza pasul, and the portion of them that were sin offerings would be invalid. And so everybody who had a sin offering would have to bring a new offering, and everybody who had an ola would be fine. Lamata, if they were brought below, and that's where the right place is for the application of blood for a sin offering if it's a bird. So matzah kasher, matzah pasul. So again, we would say that half are kosher, half are not. Meaning that the entire half, that is the portion of which that are the sin offerings, will have fulfilled the obligation of sin offerings, and the portion of which that are olot would have to be replaced. So shnei, but achas lamata, achas lamala. But if in fact you brought some above and some below, so then now shneim psulos. Now everything is going to be puzzle. Shani omer, as we've seen previously, because we say chatas kriva lamala, the chatas was brought improperly above because the chatas is supposed to go below. The ola kriva lamata, and the ola was brought improperly, I'll put in parentheses, lamata, it was brought below, because an ola is supposed to be brought above. And we don't assume that you did the right thing. And so every one of those sacrifices will need to be replaced. Basically identical solution to if you let them all die. So Ella, but what do we see? The bottom line is, in this question, is we see that that after the fact, if they are offered, they are valid, and that contradicts Rava's statement. Rava had just said that even if they're offered, they're not going to be valid. So Elaha Kamanda Amar Balechayim Nidchin. No, when Rava said that once they're rejected, it's not going to be possible, that even if you offered it, it's going to be invalid, that's consistent with the viewpoint that live animals that become dachoy, that become rejected, are permanently rejected. But when it comes to the Mishnah in Kinim, ha Kamanda Amar Balechayim Eina Nidchin. But when it came to the case of the situation in Maseches Kinim, that second Mishnah in the first parak, that's according to the view that the living creatures, even though again you're not supposed to offer them and they're all supposed to die, if you were to bring them, we don't say that they're permanently rejected. So, all right, fine. Okay, so you've excused the second Mishnah in Maseches Kinim. But I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you another example, and I'm going to give you an example where everybody pretty much agrees that you once something is nidche and rejected, everybody treats it as rejected. Because harei shchutin. Let's talk about
How do
slaughtered
you
animals.
know this? Kinim here, didn't we say that if he brings the chatas in the wrong place, it's rejected, and bring the ola in the wrong place, it's rejected, right? They're not accepted.
Yes, yes.
So
But
how do we say
but
that? What? How do you? Where's the man the Omer? The Bali Chaim ain't on
no, no, no.
the
So take
things.
a look. You're focusing on the achas lamata, achas lamala, but
Right.
take a look at if all of them asan lamala, if all of them were done above, well then the half that were olot are kasher, and if all of them were done below, the half that were or the portion that were chataot are kasher. That's the piece that is serves as a question on Rava.
So part of them are rejected, though.
Yeah, part of them are certainly going to be rejected because they were brought in the wrong location.
Right. Right.
But the point is that before lechatchila, right? If you were to ask what you're supposed, if the Kohen asks what he's supposed to do, the halacha is lechatchila. You're supposed to let them all die, and so as a result, they are effectively all rejected, or at least momentarily rejected. And yet, if you were to bring them, they're not permanently rejected because we say that if you brought them in the right location, those that are brought in the right location are considered valid. That's the question on Rava. Rava
Some, but
said that
some,
once
some are
rabbis,
some are accepted. Not all of them, though.
yes, some of them are accepted, exactly, but the possibility of them being accepted was rejected by Rava. Rava's statement was that now that we said that the animals should not be offered, lichatchila, we're going to say that if you do offer them, even if you offer them in the right location, even if you do everything correctly, they are not going to affect us acceptance. And that's inconsistent with the fact that here we have that if you did offer them in the right location, they would affect acceptance.
Right.
So that's the question. And so we answer the question by saying that Rava's opinion is according to the view that once you have a live animal that's rejected, the live animal remains rejected forever, ever. Whereas the opinion in the Mishnah in Kinim is that when you have a live animal, it does even though it can be rejected and therefore lechatchila you're supposed to burn it. Once a live animal that you do the right thing to, it can eventually be acceptable again. Meaning that we can say, hey, we brought it in the right location. We brought some of these animals in the right location, and so those animals will be treated as if they were valid sacrifices and fulfill the obligations of the owners of those sacrifices.
So we're
Which
left with the
means
machloket, aren't we?
what? Well,
Aren't
we're
we
left
left?
with a machloka between Rava and this Mishnah. But
Right.
Rava follows one Tana, and this Mishnah follows another Tana. And we can have a machlokas Tanayim.
We don't have a maskana yet, though, do we?
No, no, we don't have a maskana. We don't have a maskana, and we don't have, and we have two different opinions. And I mean, the bottom line is that I don't think that we paskin like Rava. I think that we follow, but I'm not 100% sure that we follow the Mishnah in Kinim, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so now we ask as a follow case. So now again, so when it's live animals, we know this machlokas between whether we say that if you can have decoy and effectively a permanent rejection with respect to a live animal, that's a machlokas when it comes to live animals. But when it comes to harei shchutin, everybody agrees that when it comes to a non-kosher when it comes to an animal that has already been slaughtered and now becomes puzzle. Once it becomes puzzle, it cannot become kosher again. Okay. And so that's at least what we think everybody says. And yet, listen to the following Mishnah, Utnan. And yet we have the Mishnah that is going to be on Daf Ayin Zayin Amabet. So in a few days from now, Rabbi Eliezer says, now this Mishnah is dealing with a slaughtered blemished animal whose head became mixed with the heads of other sacrifices, and which are all considered rejected because one of them has a blemish in it. And so we don't know which head is from the blemished animal, and therefore all of them are effectively rejected. And yet Rabbi Eliezer says the following: Im karav harosh shel echad mehen, if one of the heads is brought, yikrivu kol haroshim. Well, now all of the heads are brought. So, whoa. So that the point being that even though you have a slaughtered animal where we would generally say that that once it's rejected, it's always rejected. Here we're seeing that when you have a b'di'evet situation and you do offer it, it can still be acceptable. And so that shows, again, that seems to suggest that who cares what you think about whether or not we are holding about dichoy. It doesn't make a difference what you say about dichoy, because everybody agrees that dead animals have the concept of dichoy. And so as a result, despite whatever anybody would hold about dichoy, we have an opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, according to whom we are going to paskin. And we're going to say that that's going to be that if you did offer one, then all of them can be offered, meaning that you can offer all of them, indicating that b'diavad is going to all be good. And therefore, that's completely inconsistent with Rava's statement that says that even if the sacrifices were offered b'diavad, it's always going to be invalid. It's always going to be rejected. So, no, don't rush too fast. Hu de Amar Chanan HaMitzri. No, Rabbi Eliezer is holding like Chanan HaMitzri, who says that, you know what? There is a concept of no dichoy even when it comes to a slaughtered animal. Tanya, because he says the following. We have a brisa. Chanan HaMitzri Omer, Afilu dam bekos. Even the blood when you have the two goats for Yom Kippur, and one of them gets slaughtered and sprinkled inside the Kodesh. And now we did that. We didn't do the sprinkling yet, but we've got the blood of that goat that's going to go inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim and be sprinkled inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and then outside in the Kodesh and on the golden altar and all the places that it's going to be sprinkled. And now we have that. And unfortunately, the he-goat that's supposed to go to Azazel drops dead. So we never got to bring it. But these animals are supposed to be brought as a pair. And so what does Chanan HaMitzri say? That if ilu dam b'chos, even if you already slaughtered the animal that's going to be brought la Hashem, and the other animal that's going la Azazel drops dead, maybe chaveiro, you can bring a new pair to the animal whose blood you're holding in your hands in a cup, umezaviglo, and create a pair for the dead goat whose blood you're holding. And that blood will now be kosher again, and you'll be allowed to throw that blood. Even though other people say, no, once that the goat Azazel dies, you need a new pair to be brought. And so that is the position of Chanan HaMitzri. And so Chanan HaMitzri supports the idea. So when we say, when Rabbi Eliezer says that if the head of one of them is offered, that all the heads should be offered, now we're saying that actually it is still about the concept of dichoy. Dichoy does matter, and it's just a different viewpoint with respect to dichoy. And so as a result, when Rava says his point, he's referring to the concept of dichoy even by live animals. And the Mishnah in Kinim says dichoy does not apply to live animals. And the Mishnah on Ayin Zayin Amabet says that, you know what? Dichoy doesn't even apply to dead animals. And so we have these three different opinions, and it's just a machlokas among Tanoim, and as a result, Rava has the ability to disagree. Okay, so Now that we've done all of that, the Gemara discusses another case where our Mishnah and Rabbi Eliezer's view on Daf Ayin Zayin Amabet are going to be relevant. And so, especially because we just saw those views, it makes sense to cite to do this Gemara as well today. So Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Amar Rav Tabas Shel Avodas Kochavim. If you have a ring that was for an idol, and Rashi tells us it's from the top of the narrow lines. We're on Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph now. Top of the narrow lines, it's 6, 9, 12, 15, it's about 16 lines down in the narrow lines. Tabad Shel Avodas Kochavim Sheniskashta, that was beautifying ba avodas kochavim, meaning that the ring was not actually, it wasn't like the ring of the king that put the ring down and said bow down to the ring or whatever. The ring wasn't the avodah zarah. The ring was just an element of beautifying the avodah zarah, and that ring now got mixed up. Shenis arba b'mea tabaot. It got mixed up with a whole bunch of other rings. And so as a result, they all become puzzle. They all become, you're not allowed to benefit from them. Now one of them falls into the Yamagadol, the Mediterranean Sea. So Hutru Kulan, now they all become permitted. Tamrinan Hachtanafal Hainu Deisura, because we say that the one that fell in was the one that's prohibited. And Tozos helps us understand what's going on here with this case. As to why it would be that Rav would say that this is permitted. Okay, so v'nafla achas mehen liyam hagadol hutru kulan mishum demidaoraisa beruva batal. Now, technically, when you have even something that was a beautifying thing for avodah zarah, it should become batal when you have a majority of things that are kosher. Pirashnu, as we've explained, as Tosfos has explained elsewhere. Mishum hachi, therefore, hekilukan, the rabbis were lenient here. But v'dafka nafla mamegla. But it's got to be a situation where one of the rings fell into the sea by itself. Aval hipila, if you were to cause it to fall, meaning if you were to take one of the rings and throw it into the sea, afilu shogig, even if you did it by accident, not realizing that this would be that's problematic, kansinan, we would do a kanas, we would penalize the person, atumezim, because we don't want to have the person do it on purpose and think that it's going to be valid. And so as a result, we would say that all of them are not kosher. So the step number one is that when one of the rings falls into the Great Sea, into the Mediterranean, we're dealing with where it fell in, not through anything that you had control over. Vidafka, moreover, liyam hagadol. It's specifically talking about the Mediterranean. Why the Mediterranean? She'ena ba'ayin, because it's not visible. And so as a result of al pirshalo, but just separating one is not sufficient. And so as a result, we'll stop in there in the Tosfos, but that's the idea. That the idea is that because the ring, we no longer know where it is, and it's separated on its own, and technically, rabbinically, it would be, biblically, it would be permitted in the first place. So now we can also allow it to go forward and it'll be permitted. So Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman, Rava asks Rav Nachman, I don't understand. Afilu achas beribo. Our Mishnah says that even if you have one animal mixed with 10,000 animals, yumuzu kulan, they all have to be left to die. But amai, why? Based on your theory, that if one of them were to die, and based on your theory that if one gets separated and thrown away, so then it should be okay. So nema demis, let's say that the first one that dies, isuramis, is the one that was usur. And so we didn't have anything to do with that. And it's sort of no longer around because we are going to go and bury it or whatever we do with the animal. And so as a result, shouldn't we say that this is a very similar case to the ring case? And therefore, if you're saying to me that the ring is okay, you should say to me that what's left should be also okay. So Amar Le, Rav de Amar Karebi Eliezer. No, Rav disagrees with our Mishnah. And he's agreeing with Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah on Ayin Zayin Amabet. Ditanan, because what did Rabbi Eliezer say? As we saw just a few minutes ago, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Im Karav Arosh, once the head got brought, Shel Echad Mehen, from one of them, Yikru Kol Aroshim Kulan. They could all be brought together. So it's the exact same case. Again, one person brought one of them, even though they weren't supposed to. In fact, it raises a question on Tosfos because I don't understand that when if one of them was brought and we're saying that that's analogous, that's more like the Shogate case of but getting rid of it. And there are some who disagree with Tosfos and say that in fact the concept here is a sveka concept. That what do we have? We have a double suffix. First of all, we have maybe this one is it or maybe it's not. And then the second is maybe the one that was in the ocean is it, and maybe not. So meaning maybe it wasn't in at all. And so that's why we end up with a sveka. And so as a result, that's the basis to say that it's mutter. But when second, Rava says back, no, it doesn't work. Meaning Rav's statement cannot be just simply consistent with Rabbi Eliezer, because Rav seemed to be saying that you could sell every ring individually. But V'ha'amar Rabbi Elazar says, Lo hitir Rabbi Eliezer, when the Amora Rabbi Elazar says about, I think it's the Amora, says about Rabbi Eliezer, that when he says that you can offer the rest of the animals, he said that you could offer them ela shnayim shnayim. You have to offer them 2 by 2. Aval echad echad lo, but you would not be able to offer them on an individual basis. What does that mean? How do we understand that? What is that trying to say? So take a look at the 5th line down in the Rashi on Ayin Daled Amud Aleph. Okay, V'hamar Rabbi Lazar. So lekaman bepirkin delo hita Rabbi Eliezer lahakriv es hanosarin. Ela shnayim shnayim. We're going to see that Rabbi Elazar only allows to bring those the remaining heads two at a time. Why 2 at a time? Devade chad menayu dehetera. Because let's think about it. We know that one head is problematic in the entire group. We'll assume that there's 15 heads. One of them gets offered initially. So now we've got 14 heads left. One of them might be problematic. Well, if you bring 2 heads at the same time, so we know that one of the heads is definitely mutter to bring, because only one head is usser in the first place. So if you bring 2, one of those 2 is definitely mutter. Shaharei lo nisara behen elabal mum echad. Because after all, there was only one animal that had the mum on it in the first place. So one of those 2 is definitely going to be okay. Ubechol chad amrinan midechavre lav deisurehu. And we can say each one is, that's not going to be problematic. Nami lav deisurahu. And we can say about the other one that, the other one. So one of them is definitely not usher because you're bringing 2 and we only have one usher one in the whole group. So one of them is definitely not usher. And you know what? The other one is probably not usher either. Bahu de isura azal. Because the other one's probably not usher because heck, maybe you already brought the usher one in the first place. Azolei. Bahakrava Rishona. The first one that was brought, maybe that one was the one that was the mum. Shekarav echad mehen, because you already brought one of them. Aval echad ve'echad. But if you were to bring them each individually, lo yakrivu haroshim, you shouldn't bring the heads. Tibakol chad, because with each one individually, misafkinan dilma deisurahu. Maybe this one is problematic. Deleka lameber migo, and we don't say that since you could have done this, we're gonna say that it's okay even if you bring one by one, but rather you have to bring them 2 by 2. So Amarle. So Rav Nachman in explaining what he was saying about Rav's rule, remember he's the one who says that according to Rav, if one ring falls into the Mediterranean, all the other rings are kosher. So what did he mean by all the other rings are kosher? Tarti kamina. I'm also referring to 2 rings at a time. And Rashi explains, Sheyimkor hatabaot shnayim shnayim. You sell 2 at a time. And so as a result, that's how it's going to all work. And so therefore, it'll all be okay. And so as a result, that's what Rav Nachman is saying. Rav is really saying that, because in each ring pair, one of them is definitely kosher, and the other one we can say is a sveka because maybe it's from the majority in the first place, and even if it's not from the majority, maybe the first ring was the one that was was the one that was the idolatry, and therefore this ring is not. And so we have two svekot, and as a result, we can thereby say that everything is hunky dory. So we are in the middle of discussing complicated mixtures. If you are enjoying this, then that is awesome because you know what? We've got more mixtures coming tomorrow. So I wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful day and looking forward to continuing our learning together.
What time tomorrow?
7:45 also. We'll begin at the same time and we'll finish by, 8:20, 8:25 so that we can get to davening. So if you want a meeting in person and online together. So, feel free to join us either way. All are welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Will the shul be open at 7:40?
Uh, It should be. I will double check. I will make sure that
Okay.
it's open at 7:40. We're using the regular entry code, the Daf Yomi code that gets you upstairs.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day.
You too. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.